It's our first checking in meeting around food freedom. Some of you have done food freedom classes with me before, and this one's different in that we're still going to be talking about food freedom and what it looks like to be free around food. Are you dealing with foods that are challenging you? Are you hooked into the food system? Right? The system of food. We know what the education system is. We know what, the medical system is, but what about the food system? And then we're going to talk growing food and what that looks like and how we can do that and how we can do it intuitively. And that's going to be the biggest part of this food freedom aspect of this program. I don't even know what to call it, because it's going to be something that's collaborative, right? We're going to bring our pieces to this space and we're going to see what fits for us. But it's about looking at freedom around food. Now, what does that mean? What does that look like? What does it look like to grow your own food? Can you grow enough food for yourself that you don't have to be reliant on? And why are you growing your own food? Is it from enjoyment? Is it quality? Is it fear? I can't tell you how enjoyable it is not to watch the news, because there's all sorts of information out there that could cause me to go into fear around food. And that's not what I'm interested in, because I want my food to be about love. I want it to completely be about love. And if you know me, as you get to know me, you're going to find that gardening is such a passion. It's such a passion. And in a way that my friends come in through the backyard, because the back gate, because they know where I'm going to be. They don't knock on the front door. They know where I'm going to be at. And I'm probably going to be in my bare feet. And they're probably going to come up on me and I'm not going to notice them. Why? Because I'm so engaged with what I'm doing and where I'm at that I'm not really paying attention to anything else. They're like, why are you talking to yourself? I'm like, I'm not talking to myself. I didn't even realize I was talking, but well, they're like, what the heck? It's like you're talking as if the plants are talking back to you. And I'm like, well, you can't hear them? Like, seriously, can't you hear they're talking out loud to us all the time? I said, sometimes they're not talking, sometimes they're singing. And they just look at me like, oh, Judy, another one of those things I just have to accept about you, because but you maybe do, and you don't even know it, right? Sometimes we don't even know that we're listening. We're listening to what's happening around us when we're in nature. And I do. I'm listening to what they're asking for, how they serve others, how I can support more, what it is that's going to allow me to allow these plants to give us the most, right? So why do you, what is it for you around food freedom? What does that look like for you? And you can always share in the chat. I'm going to post those chat comments as a text in with our call recordings. Okay, just so you know, so that you can go back and take a look in case somebody shares a resource or whatever. Okay, but what does growing look like for you? What is growing your own food? What does food freedom look like to you? What is it that you want to do? How is it that you want to do that, or that you want to support someone that's doing that? Because I know, Maureen, for you, Jim does most of the gardening, but you have this beautiful lemon tree that's yours that you look after too. And how beautiful is that, that you have this lemon that is worth maybe 10 or 20 lemons that you could buy in a grocery store. Like a lemon that I grow, I don't need to squeeze the whole lemon to put it in my water. And yeah, we're going to be talking about health in this program as well, because they go in, they're hand in hand, right? Food helps us to express ourselves, whether it's on the outside in the beauty of our garden, or whether it's on the inside, the beauty of our garden, right? I love gardening so much that this is like inside of this is a bit like gardening to me. It's like I want to make sure my biome is happy. Well, I want to make sure the biome of my soil is happy. I want there to be great circulation and ventilation. I'm not too keen on too much ventilation through the body, but a little needs to happen sometimes. But those are a part, like this is my garden and this is my garden. I spend a lot of time gardening here. I want to know what weeds are beneficial to me and what ones aren't. Some of them are really stressful. Bindweed is one of my most stressful weeds, but can I listen to see where it might be beneficial? I don't know. My chickens eat it. They don't mind it. So can I give it to some other animal? The rabbits eat it. And so I give it to the rabbits and they turn it into fertilizer, which then I give back to the gardens. So I'm always listening. Where does it fit in? And why do I want to do this? Why do I want to have freedom around food? So one of the things that I'm always watching for is what can it look like? Because Madeline, you too, Pete does a lot of the gardening. More than you do, but what happens if all of a sudden you can start hearing your plants? Does it change your relationship to food? Does it change your relationship to what is happening around you? So what does it look like to have food freedom? So not the food freedom where we're free in our minds of food and we're free of addiction, because we can go into that too. This really is a collaborative thing. Where do you want to go when it comes to food freedom? But my slant on this is really about what does it look like? Where can I garden? Where can I grow food for myself? So I've been growing food before I was able to do it on my own, right? We had huge gardens when I was young. Like my job was to weed the gardens and help plant the gardens and help harvest the gardens and help water the gardens. I did that from the time probably I was about 5 or 6 years old. So I've been doing gardening forever, you know, but I've done so much more than that because I understand biodynamic gardening. I understand no-till gardening. I understand what it looks like to grow hydroponically. Like, so I'll show pictures of it at some point. And if you haven't made it into the membership area yet, you should have access to that now, except for maybe Madeline and Susan. I don't know that I got you in there yet today, but I will get you there soon. And I'll be sharing lots in there. And I hope to find a way to allow everybody to share pieces, because it's not just about me and what I've done. But I grow greens all winter long in my house when it's not nice enough outside to grow. And so I have this, it's a Juice Plus home tower. So it's a hydroponic tower with water running in it on cycles. I have indoor growing lights, which I don't love because of the EMFs, but sometimes we have to do that in order to grow inside. I prefer to stick it in my window where it gets lots of light and just rotate it, but sometimes it's just not enough hours. So I'll turn the grow lights on for enough hours in order to get those greens to keep going. So I'm a bit like a mad scientist with that when it comes to hydroponics. I love to play with my nutrients and I love to increase my magnesium really as much as I can and still get really good fruiting so that I get all the nutrients I need out of what I eat instead of having to do supplements. That's to me part of food freedom. Well, what can it look like? Where can you grow? Um, you know, some people only have balconies or decks. Okay, well, we can do that. But think about it. A pot is this big, right? That's too limiting to me. So how are we going to grow things that we can grow up on a trellis if we have a deck or we have a balcony? What about sprouts? All you need is a jar, really. You can have a jar and a piece of cheesecloth over a jar to grow a whole bunch of sprouts. They're the most nutrient rich things that we can do for ourselves. It doesn't have to be the whole counters filled with sprouts. My family gets a little fed up with that sometimes. But can we grow grasses inside? Yeah, we can. We can. Trust me, my family gets a little frustrated with me when it comes to all sorts of gardening stuff, but I don't pay any attention. I just, it's only for the winter. I'll be outside again in a couple months. No big deal, right? Just no big deal. But what about, maybe you only can grow in your home. I know lots of people that have either hydroponic grow towers like gardens. I use a tower just because I like the 360 ability to grow. So I have this huge, big, bushy hydroponic tower in my house. And it has a really nice big reservoir. But a lot of people like the garden because you can put it up against a wall. And so you're growing on 3 sides instead of all 4 sides. I'm like, okay, let's fill the room with this. Like, let's get 4 or 5 towers. But my family are like, yeah, no. They get a little shocked when they come out of their room in the morning. My husband especially comes out in the morning and I usually set the timer to come on, just shortly after he gets up. And if he sleeps in for 10 minutes, he comes out and the tower pops on and he's just like, what the, right? So they all just have to deal. It's what I do. It's what I do. I love food freedom. Another thing I want to get into is how do we grow enough food that it's not just a few nibbles, over the summer. Again, if we're looking at decks or patios, that container, how are we going to go up? How are we going to grow in a way where we can hang? Like, have you seen the tomato bags that you can plant tomato plants in and then it hangs upside down? So that's another way that you can utilize space in a way that you can be doing this in places that are a little tighter or a little smaller. But we've got everything from raised beds. We've got, like, I just set up a mushroom area this year. I just moved, for anybody that's fresh to me, I just moved to a small acreage and I was like, yes, now I can grow all the mushrooms I want. So I go up into the national forest and I gather up logs that are fresh. And my son cuts them at, whatever length I want. I bring them home and I drill holes in them and I plug them with mushrooms and all of that. And then I cover them with wax. And then I put them standing or laying down in my mushroom area.
Oh, you all came back.
So there's all these different ways that we can be either cultivating or growing. What else? What other way can we do it? What if we don't have an acreage and we don't really have a balcony that we want to grow on? We have cats or whatever. What about checking locally for community gardens? So community gardens are popping up all over the place, and sometimes they're not super advertised, and sometimes they are. Sometimes they're part of like the recreational, like a town system. The town looks after it. And sometimes it's just somebody who has a few acres that's on, I use Nextdoor in the US, but I'm sure in the UK or in Australia, there will be similar things where you can look in your neighborhood Facebook group or whatever for individuals that have a couple acres that, or just a little small plot that they want to share the space with. That's another way you can garden before you have a whole bunch of space for that. But that's where, maybe you buy yourself a small table and you start growing your microgreens and your sprouts inside in whatever way. And maybe it's a shelf that you can put by a window where they're going to get a little light. Or you can just set them in the light somewhere outside a little bit. But there's so many different individuals starting community gardens or garden shares that are amazing. I tend to look on Nextdoor all the time because there's all sorts of people that have all these beautiful fruit trees, and there's no way they can process all of that, or there's no way they can eat all of that. So they're advertising in Nextdoor, okay, come pick for free. There's no money involved. Generally, I have a bag of cookies in the freezer or something that I will leave on somebody's doorstep because they'll just give you the address and you go pick pears or apples or whatever. And I leave a bag of cookies or a box of cookies on the step just to say thank you. But it's not necessarily about an exchange. So we can find all sorts of ways to do this gardening food freedom thing without having to do it all ourselves. Nextdoor is another place that I advertise when I have too many squash. That's the joke. When you garden and you grow squash, your neighbors lock their doors of their vehicles when they come to visit because they don't want any more squash. Because you're always sneaking squash to everybody because there's only so much you can use, right? And my freezer is full of grated squash, and I've dehydrated squash and made zucchini flour, and I've got all these squash just literally coming out my ears. That's another thing my family gets a little frustrated with because they are like, we need to be able to walk up the stairs to get in the house. You can't store all your squash all over the steps to like cure them all the time, right? I'm like, well, yeah, I can. I just did. Yeah, but we need to be able to walk to the house. It's funny. It's like, okay. And my people know that they can come get squash. So this year was really fun because I moved to an area where grapes grow really, really well. And I don't have my grapes established, but I met someone that does. So instead of me waiting for my grapes for a couple of years to establish, because I planted quite a few grapes this year. I offered to go pick grapes for her, and I brought tons home. I made gallons and gallons of grape juice because my kids drink it. I drink it. And then I cleaned all the grapes and I picked all the grapes and I put them in buckets, like honey buckets, and I put them in the freezer. So now the kids go out and they'll get a little container of frozen grapes and they'll sit there and eat grapes while they're watching something. I'm like, how awesome is that? So much better than potato chips, right? We're going to go there. All these little different things that you've either gathered up or I've gathered up that we get to share with one another. Okay. So we're going to just dive into food freedom in the way that it looks for you, for me, for us. Questions, sharings, they're all going to be welcome. Okay. That's what it's about. Because some of you have been gardening maybe as long as I have. Maybe. And I want to dive in. If you have questions about herbs, if you have questions about sustainability, man, I'm in because that's my MO. I'm all about planting things that are going to come back every year. And that doesn't just mean perennial, because that means semi-annual. That means plants that replant themselves. And when you see the pictures of my gardens, I don't have rows in my raised beds. No way. It's stuffed right full. And I love companion planting, all of that. So there's no no holds barred, I guess. No bars hold, no, what's that term? I don't even know what it is, but it's like, let's go there. Let's have some fun with gardening. And before we go any further, it was my birthday last week, and I don't really put much effort into, like, I don't, birthdays don't really mean a whole bunch for me anymore. I like celebrating life every single day. And I want my life to equal what I would want my birthday day to be every day, minus maybe, a few of the donuts or whatever my husband tries to sneak in. I don't need those every day. But my birthday this year, I started something, and it's a seed share. It's all about a flow forward model, because to me, gardening is that. I don't charge for anything that I share from my garden. There's no exchange. It's a flow forward model. It's where I could start a market garden and I could exchange with others. But at this point, that's not what I want to do. I want to flow forward with this piece. That's why this is even donation. It's not about exchange so much as it's just, what do we value and how can we move it forward? Well, I value seeds more than I value money. My husband, it drives him crazy, but I do. I would rather have a box full of seeds under my bed than a whole bunch of money stuffed under the mattress. I can't eat money. Sorry, I can't. And these are the times when maybe I might need those seeds more than ever, not from fear, but out of this sovereign place that I want to live from. So seed share, what does that look like? I might have some seeds that I collected this year or that I can still collect, and then I pass them to someone. I might have someone in another country that I think would, get a kick out of receiving a few packages of seeds. So I go online and I find a seed company in that country and I order it and send it to them. I can't really send seeds from here through the personal mail. That gets caught up in customs quite often. But I can go to that country, UK or AU or CA, and find seed companies that can send to them. No, it's just flow forward. So how many places can I share seeds? And what if I don't know who to give the seeds to? Like Maureen and I were talking about this on the weekend. Caroline, you were there too. And it was like, you have a reception room. Why not a little bowl full of seeds instead of candy? Why not, when I do little gift baskets or whatever at Christmas time for individuals, why not throw a package of seeds in there? If you've collected them, we want to be kind. We want to make sure our seeds are weed free, especially if they don't understand how to use weeds. But I collect all sorts of seeds. I have like literally a container this big of calendula seed. What a bonus. What a bonus. Like everybody needs calendula so that they don't have so many bugs on their plants. It's a fantastic companion plant and they're beautiful. And they keep blooming even when the weather is getting cooler. They last the first couple frosts usually if they're not too tough, right? If the frosts aren't too tough. It's so powerful to think about how we can grow not just our gardens, but our environment, our community, our world. What do we want our world to look like? I would love to be part of a flow forward model where I never, ever have to be concerned about food because my neighbor has a pear tree and they're like, no way I'm going to use all those pears. Would you help me use them? Not for exchange, but just because it's been given. Like all those grapes, literally my counters were full of grapes, like a foot high once I got them washed. You know what that would have cost me to buy? One, I can't buy grapes like that because those are not the commercialized grapes. Two, I enjoyed picking them. And three, it was useful to her because I picked some for her too. I wouldn't have spent that much money on grapes probably. Right? So this flow forward model is to me really truly food freedom. So that's what I'm going to task you with. And it's not just for this week. It's for, whenever it strikes you to maybe share some seeds with someone. Okay. And then we get into, have you ordered your seeds yet? For the next season. For some of you, you're going into the season. So I know we have two different seasons going on here, right? But for those of you in the Northern Hemisphere, have you ordered your seeds for spring? And do you know how many seeds you could be planting now? There's so many seeds that can be planted in the fall so that your spring planting is easier. So what are we looking at? How are we looking at this? And how are we listening? What are we listening for when it comes to our seeds and our plants? I'm just checking out the chat here. So Madeline, you're going to learn from here instead of having to learn from Pete, huh? That's awesome. You'll be like going for it. You'll be talking to him like, hey, did you hear how the calendula wants to live over here by, the basil? It'll be great. A friend of yours, Priya, says that it's best to use seeds within 2 to 3 years. Is this true? How long can we keep seeds for? So yes, Priya, but some seeds don't even last 2 or 3 years. So something like what? Like sweet violets, those are best if they're planted like right away after they're collected, but they'll usually last about a year, but their germination rate will decrease pretty dramatically after a year. So it depends on the seeds. There's some seeds like say poppy seeds. I'll put those little suckers in the freezer and they'll last for 10 years. They are virulent and they will do all sorts of things, but different seeds last for different amount of time. And we can keep seeds longer if we keep them in the refrigerator. If we, I'm just going to pull up a quick note here because I want to keep track of a few of the questions so that when I post the recordings, you know what questions that you're going in for listening to. When it comes to seeds, when they're kept dark, not exposed to light, when they are not exposed to moisture, when they are kept cool, and when they're not exposed to acids. So the acids on your hands, I never put seeds in my hands that I'm going to put back in a package. So if I'm going to plant something, I might put seeds into my hand, but I never put it back into the package because the seeds that are still in the package, I want them to germinate. So I don't want to have the acids on my hands back with those seeds. So if I do pour out too many, heck, I just scatter them where I've already planted them because some of those seeds may not germinate and some of them may come up double and I'll keep them or I'll thin them or whatever. But that's going to keep your seeds stronger for longer. Okay. So if I'm in the garden and it's pretty moist day, I may leave my seeds in the house. And I may just, go in and get one type of seed at a time in my little container. and then bring it back outside. It's more effort, but then I save my seeds. And I've had some seeds that were just stored in a cool room in the dark for 10 years and they still sprout. But you're risking it. If you're only using seeds that are 10 years old, you might not get anything come up. Now, that doesn't matter because there's something else you can plant in that space. If they don't come up, if they don't germinate, no big deal. It's not like you plant once and you're done. But I want to make sure that to the degree I can, I'm going to get as much out of my seeds as possible. So those are the things that I'm going to be watching around my seeds. And we can go into that in further, seed storage in more depth as we go along. But those are the main things. Make sure that they're cool, dry, no sunlight, and in their packages, no acids. Okay. Those are the main things about keeping seeds happy. Do you have to? I do store a lot of seeds in the freezer. Some seeds I want to store in the freezer because they are the type of seeds that need to be stratified. It's called cold stratifying. And so some of those seeds I store in the freezer on purpose. If it's a seed that can come back after a cold season, like think about poppy seeds, dill seed, calendula, anything that replants itself from the seed, I'll probably put in the freezer if I didn't plant it in the fall. Or if I have too much seed, I'll keep it in the freezer. You don't always have to, but things like, say, wild blueberries, Saskatoons, even blueberries, and poppies, they need to be cold stratified, which means put those seeds in the freezer. And we can go into more detail with those. I'll share some resources that I have. I just have a really handy dandy companion seed chart and a few things like that I'll be sharing. Do we have a checklist somewhere about approximate lifespan of seeds? I'll look, Priya, and we'll gather something like that up, okay? We definitely will, because it's so unique to each seed that we need a little bit of information. And if we can't find one, we'll start building one. Okay, we'll start building a resource for seed lifespans. I don't mind doing that. I just realized that this year, I don't generally keep track of things super well because I'm the one that plants it. I'm the one that knows what the plants are. I know where I've planted them. I don't share it with anybody else really. My kids, they'll come and help me for pieces, or my husband will come and work up some soil for me or something. But I'm the one that keeps track of it, and I do a lot of that in my head. So this year, I highly encourage, grab a journal or start a note on your computer or something and keep track of what you do when it comes to your garden, like when you buy your seeds, the little pieces that you gather up. And I'm going to make this recommendation because I was looking back in my journal already, my garden diary journal. Underline the things you planted, because otherwise it's really hard to go back and find those pieces. So underline what you planted, even if you're just sharing, okay, it was a beautiful day. I believe this spot, I was checking it out. There's perfect shade. It feels like it's going to have enough moisture. Oh, I can divert the irrigation through, and so I planted this. Underline it. And I highly recommend, if you're going to keep track of the name of the plant and the Latin name, or the, what is it called? The botanical name. Okay. Because I can say, oh, I got this beautiful fig tree. And then somebody asked me, well, what kind of a fig tree is that? And I'm like, I don't know. Give me a minute. I'm going to go back to my journal and I'm going to find the botanical name for that fig tree that I purchased. Okay. I inherited a bunch of stuff this year. It's just what it is. I don't know the botanical names for some of the things that I've inherited. It's okay. I just have to share. You know what? Here, I don't know what this peach tree is. Here's a peach. Go plant the seed. Right? That's all I can do for them. And I can evaluate, how well is this plant doing in my environment? What is my growing zone? All of those pieces, and I can put it in that journal. Okay, I'm talking a lot. I love this. I love all these questions in here too, because we can just go for it. But you're more than welcome to pop in and have, your voice heard too. Approximate lifespan of seeds. Priya will get to that. What about squash? Squash will actually survive. They're good even out of the fridge or freezer, Caroline, for like 3-4 years generally. When it comes to squash seed, the germination rate will decrease gradually over time. But the best part about squash is you're growing it in a hill and you're going to plant 5 or 6 seeds. If you know your seed is a few years older, plant a few extra seeds because you end up choosing your most vital plants in that hill and getting rid of the rest. So if a few seeds don't germinate, not a big deal, right? So the older your seeds are, just plant more, especially for something like that. Discuss what we should be planting now in the Northeast. So let's get to that in a second, Madeline. But Caroline, when you're coming, anything that has like gooey or stickiness to it or gelatinous to it, like tomatoes, they have a gelatinous cover around the seeds. That's protective. When the seeds fall to the ground, that protectiveness breaks down over the winter. But if we're looking to grab seeds or store seeds from something that's really gelatinous or really like squash seeds, you can pour hot water over it, and that will allow some of that squash, that breaks that down quite quickly, but it doesn't hurt the seed. So you're not boiling water over, but hot water, and then it allows you to bring the seeds out quicker. That's one way that you can store squash seeds or tomato seeds. But my favorite is literally just grab a handful of all that slime in the seeds and put it in a container of water. Put it in a windowsill, just room temperature. And then every day change the water and see if you can just kind of strain out the slimy stuff and the gelatinous stuff, and then put more water on it. You might do that for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days. And then your seeds will gradually float to the bottom, and you just keep pouring off like the squash guts and the gelatinous stuff. And then you're left with seeds. Now, the challenge is there might be a little gelatinous stuff, but you can just spread it on a paper towel. And that afterwards, then they can dry. But you need to leave those seeds out for a while for them to completely dry so that they don't end up germinating in the bag, in the dark where you're storing your seeds. But that's one of the best ways to get those seeds away from either something gelatinous or the squash, guts, things like that. There's lots of different ways to collect seeds. I've even just, mind you, this is quite funny. I've just put a squash in the garage, in a cool garage, and opened it up in the spring and then just planted it. But if you forget it's there, expect a whole bunch of germinated seeds inside that squash come spring. They will be germinated, and they're usually stunted. So I like to just make sure that I grab it as quick as I can and pull it out of there and put it in the ground. And that's one of the ways that you can do something like a winter squash. It doesn't work with zucchini because zucchini will just rot, right? But it works great for winter squash if you can just find somewhere to store that for the winter. Okay, so in the Northeast, Madeline, perennials, lots of perennials. If something like calendula, so I'll grow calendula in the fall. A couple weeks before it's going to freeze, I'll start the calendula. Maybe a month before it's going to freeze, I'll start the calendula. So most perennials can be started in the Northeast. But the very most important thing is garlic. So if you can still work the ground in the fall, garlic is the thing to plant. And you can, order garlic from any seed supply. Right now, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, that's when they're providing you with garlic, is because this is the time to be planting it. I don't really ever grow garlic in the springtime because I can't get it in the ground fast enough for it to completely finish, but I might be able to now where I live here. So it depends on your growing zone. What is your growing zone? You go online right now or after this call, and you take a look, just, the name of your town and what is my growing zone. That's going to give you a whole bunch of information as to what you can grow and what's going to be supported in your area. Like if you're 5 and under, it's really hard to grow certain fruit trees. I'm not quite 7, but I'm like 6, 8, 6, 9. So there's differing degrees between 6 and 7 for growing zone. So I can't grow lemons and limes and avocados outside here. We have too much frost for too many days and it's too cold. But I can put them in a geothermal greenhouse, right? So my zone dictates to me what I can grow and for how much of a season that I'm going to have. So that's going to be a huge piece of the indicator of what you're able to grow in your area. But in the Northeast, Madeline, garlic, poppies, sweet violets, you could be growing calendula. You could plant lots of herbs. Like you could plant mint and spearmint, and you could plant, what other vegetables could you plant? You could plant dill. You can decide where you want to put dill, and you could plant that in the fall. Think about anything that is not affected by frost really quickly, and you can plant it. Okay. You have to remember where you planted it. Most people lose a lot of their planting in the spring because they forgot they planted something there in the fall, right? We're not planting so much in raised beds unless it's towards the center of your raised beds. Why? Because the outer aspect of your raised bed is going to be colder, but towards the inside, it's got all this insulation. So you could plant garlic all the way down the center of your raised bed. Same with containers. The temperature decreases significantly over the winter. Perry's in Hawaii, so she doesn't have to worry about this. But she has to worry about things like seed rot. There's certain times that seeds are not going to do well in the ground because it's too wet and it's too warm and it's not time for them to grow. Right? So those are the things that we watch when it comes to our zone. Right? But when it comes to planters, right? I have some trees that I'll plant in the spring because I got them too late in the season. So I'll drop them in the ground. I'll just go dig a hole that's big enough for that planter and I'll put it in the ground because then it's got all this insulation around the planter. So that allows me in my zone to buy trees or buy perennial type plants on sale. Even though I'm not going to plant them this year, I just pop the whole pot in the ground, right? And that allows me to decrease the amount of money I spend on plants at the nursery. I try to get them from friends, like friends, we exchange plants and different things a lot, but I love to go to the nursery at the end of the season and buy stuff much discounted because they don't want to look after it over the winter. They get everything delivered in the spring. So things like cherry trees or apple trees, any kind of trees, they discount them heavily. I bring them home, I pop them in the ground in the dirt, make sure they're watered in, and I leave them until spring. And as soon as I can work the ground and it's not going to freeze anymore, I'll transplant them into the ground. But what if I need a little time to work the space in? Then I'll do that and then I'll plant them in the ground. So it's a really good way to remember that you can overwinter something that would normally live in your zone without putting it fully in the ground, because things that are in the ground are always going to do better as far as winter kill. They're not going to die as easy. Where are we at here? Yes. Spinach can be planted right now. Spinach absolutely can be planted. So can kale. Okay. So you're in a northeastern climate too, Trisha. So, being able to grow in a hydroponic system where you don't have to have dirt is actually quite doable. And there's quite a few systems that you can take a look at that to see if that would work in your apartment. And then, I've seen so many setups. It's so cool because the indoor grow lights, they're quite irritating. They're quite bright and the ambience just goes down, seriously down when you're growing in the house or in your apartment. But you can set up a really cool tent around it. And that allows for you to keep everything contained, including most of the light, right? So there's all sorts of different ways. Some people will set up screens. There's different ways that you can do it, but you can take a look at hydroponics. Now, this is something I don't recommend for most people to grow hydroponically and in dirt at the same time in the same area inside, because dirt harbors molds and bugs differently. And the last thing you want is either mold or bugs in your hydroponic anything, because do they ever do well? Like if you get aphids on your hydroponic tower, you might as well scrap it and start over. And that's the same for you, Perry, where you're at, because there's not that natural environmental pushback against bugs, right? I can leave all my dirt outside over the winter, and if it freezes hard enough, long enough, I've just gotten rid of most of my bugs, right? But if I've got a hydroponic tower and I've got dirt beside it, then I'm at much greater risk of having bugs move into my hydroponics. So you kind of have to pick or choose or put them in different spaces, and always go to your hydroponics to look after that first before you go look after your dirt pieces. Always, that's your pattern. Go to your hydroponic tower, look after that, and then go look after your plants that are in dirt. Okay. But wow, there's so many really cool, and I've even seen hydroponic pieces that people have built themselves, decrease the cost. And there's all sorts of different units out there. And that's another thing, if you go on Facebook and you look for the type of hydroponic unit you're looking for, there's usually a whole bunch of groups, and people are always selling like the Juice Plus tower. I can't tell you how many people buy them for $1,000 and then sell them for $250. So you can find some really, really good deals. That's another thing that I look for, my local, either Facebook groups or like Nextdoor is like a community, like it's not social media, but it's a community connection thing online. So I find lots and lots of good deals on pots and stuff in those places. Let's come back to the chat. Yes, spinach, kale, fantastic. You don't get enough sun anymore, so you'll be using raised beds. You mean in your garden space, Madeline? Huh. Okay, so it sounds like you need to find an arborist. They need to cut back some of your trees, woman. You need your garden space. Okay, so yeah, you've had your trees trimmed down a few times already. Raised beds work. They absolutely work. But this is what I'm doing on this new place. Okay. I'm looking for where stuff grows already and I'm covering it up. Grass and pasture land plants and weeds. They're growing so well along this one space, like all along the, like I have a tack shed, garden shed thing. And all along that space, the grass goes like crazy. Nothing gets watered there. There's no irrigation channels there. There's no sprinklers there. There's no, but everything grows amazingly there. So what am I going to do? I'm going to watch my environment and I'm going to cover that with cardboard, or I try not to use weed barrier because it breaks down so slow and it's not so great for the environment. So I generally look for unprinted cardboard. And I know there's a tiny, tiny bit of glue in there and it's going to break down over time, but not a lot. And dirt is a buffer. So it's not like you're going to get a whole lot of that anyway. Dirt buffers things. So I'll place 2 or 3 layers of cardboard and then I'll put all sorts of mulch on there. But where do I get my mulch? Because I don't pay for my mulch. I call the arborists around the area in my area and I say, okay, how can I get, can you dump? They're always looking for places to get rid of the mulch after they've looked after the trees. Right. So I'm just like, okay, this is where you back up and unload it. Now, if you don't have a space for that, you can ask them where they pile it. And you can ask if you can go get a bag of mulch. It doesn't have to be a huge load. I like load after load after load. They're like, well, what do I do with the next one? I'm like, you don't understand. You can put it right here because this one will be gone. What if we come back, tomorrow? I'm like, okay, well, it might not be gone by tomorrow. Just put it in front of this one because then they'll both be gone. Right. So I have a relationship with an arborist that I just say, if it's not diseased trees, please don't bring me diseased trees. It's like, you bet, you got it. We know what to do with those. I'm like, perfect. So I want all the mulch that they can bring me, not just to cover up things to protect them, but to start creating soil that I'll use 10 years from now. Right? This is the long game. This is about it being sustainable. This is about me knowing that even if I'm not alive, somebody's going to be able to use that. It's that flow forward model. Makes sense? Right? I want to leave it better than I found it. I want to get everything out of the way. I want to clean stuff up. I want to start building soil that I'll use 10 years from now. Yes, when it comes to collecting seeds, I talked about drying out the gelatinous seeds. You can, if you just lay them out individually, like a very thin layer of squash seeds or tomato seeds, they might still stick to the paper towel. Some of them won't. You can move the paper towel and you can put them in a bag, but you can just cut sections of your paper towel and your seeds are contained on that paper towel. And then you can just fold it up and put it in an envelope when it's completely dry. Just make sure it's completely dry. Otherwise it'll mold on you with that paper towel in there. But then you can just pull the paper towel apart and put it in the ground when you're ready to plant those seeds, right? So absolutely, you can do that, Tracy, without a doubt. So Madeline, how are you going to focus on some shade plants? Because you don't get enough sun. There's lots of plants that grow in the shade really, really well as well. And we can keep talking about that because that's another thing that's super. I listen to my plants. They talk about where they want to be planted. If I hold those seeds and I think about that plant, and yes, I know I have tons of experience, so that helps. It always helps. But my plants will tell me where they want to be planted. Full sun, shade, more acidic, more alkaline, more water, less water. All of those things factor in. And what if I plant a plant and it's not doing very well? Well, it's time for a conversation because it needs to be moved. Okay, so it's not a permanent thing, right? You can plant something, you see that it's not quite right. So you look after your sun, your light, your water, your nutrients, your traffic, because sometimes there's traffic that causes something to not, like if you're like me, you have animals. My kids have pets. So if I plant something where there's traffic and the dog's continually walking over that, doesn't matter how much water and sun or water and whatever I give it, it's not, it needs to be moved, right? I can't stop the dog from going the way the dog goes. It's just how it is. I do use a lot of mulch so the cats don't pee in my gardens. I don't like that. Not like that. But I'm listening because it's not permanent. Okay. It doesn't have to be permanent. You plant something, you check it out, you listen, and you can move it, right? But there are some shade plants that might do a little better in that area, Madeline. Mushrooms, they don't love really hot, direct sun, and they like some moisture, but not too much. So maybe that needs to happen there. Oh yeah, the whole island lost avocado trees from bugs. Tropical challenges are tough. That's why I love tree guilds. Okay, so we're doing lots of overview today, right? We can go into further detail with all of these things. We've got a little time in this hemisphere. If you're in the southern hemisphere, we got to get going on it, but bring it up if you want to know. But tree guilds. So tree guilds are really powerful in that you don't just plant a tree and leave it open around it, or just mulched around it, which is beneficial because it keeps the moisture in, right? But you want to plant plants that are bug deterrent, that bring in the nutrients and release the nutrients for that tree. So tree guilds are amazing because you plant the tree guild as big as the drip line is for a tree. So you want that tree guild to be out as far as you allow the branches to come. And pruning is a whole other art form, but I try and let my trees grow width and depth, not just depth. And so I'm planting my guilds out quite far. And so all sorts of things get planted in there, but especially in areas where there's not a lot of cold, I'm going to plant more bug deterrent plants. And that's really important to me because it'll take out a whole orchard. Bugs will take out a whole orchard because there's nothing to stop the bugs, period. And I keep ducks and chickens, and you know me, I don't eat eggs personally. My husband does, but I keep the ducks and the chickens for to look after the bugs. I can sell the eggs or I can give the eggs away. Again, I can do flow forward model and I can use those in order to keep my bugs to a minimum. Like I never have earwigs in my backyard. I hate earwigs. If there was anything I hated, it would be earwigs for whatever reason. I don't mind millipedes. I don't mind all sorts of bugs, but those earwigs, they wig me out. So I don't have them though, because the chickens come in and eat them. And I don't let the chickens in all the time because they will eventually damage things if they're cooped up too much, but they'll come in and they'll just go through the garden like crazy. Same with the ducks. The ducks are really good for orchards because they like slugs and slugs really like orchards. But what do I love about that? So my ducks come in, they eat the slugs, they poop, they give me all sorts of great nutrition for all those plants. And I've just tapped in to the cycle, right? So how can I tap into the cycle? Another thing that I always put up are bird boxes. It's hard because if you've got berries, the birds want your berries. Grow enough berries if you have space to do that. Just grow more, right? And bats, because bats won't eat your berries so much. They'll eat fruit that's on the ground sometimes, but they'll eat bugs. So I put up bat boxes. You can put a bat box up on the side of your house if you don't have a lot of space. That's okay. It doesn't matter where you are, there's generally bats of some sort, and they're fantastic for bugs, right? And bat guano. I always buy organic bat guano, bat poop for my gardens. So I might as well encourage the bats to come on in and just poop directly. Why not? Right? But all of those things are about tapping into nature's cycle or nature's principles. So as many of those pieces of the cycle that I can include, I'm going to. And if I'm growing inside in dirt, same thing. I still want to bring in things like worm poop. I don't want to bring in worms, but I want to bring in worm poop, and I want to bring in bat guano because they don't stink so bad. Like fish fertilizer, manure, like chicken manure. Yuck. I would not want to put that in my dirt in my house. But bat guano, worm castings, maybe a little bit of rabbit poop if I can find some. Those don't stink so bad. And so I can use those to condition my soils, right? Okay. Do the hydroponic greens end up with the same prebiotics that you talk about from the garden? If you can keep your windows and doors open a little bit and they can get some natural sunshine, they will have some, but nowhere near as much. Nowhere near as much. Prebiotics on your berries, plants, fruits, kale, lettuces, all of that, that comes from sun and outdoor air. Okay, so that's where those prebiotics come the most. But if you have something that you can move outside, or you have a screened in area that's not super cold, you can allow that air to come in and you get those prebiotics, just nowhere near as much as you would outside. But yeah, that's the challenge of prebiotics. That's when I really focus on getting a ton of nutrients. So I use something that Anthony Williams recommended years ago, which is Ocean Magic Minerals. It doesn't matter whether you're using hydroponics or dirt. Ocean Magic Minerals is one of the best nutrients that you can use. It's all these beautiful sea minerals that plants love, and it doesn't stink like fish fertilizer or seaweed. Like you go to any hydroponics store local, they're going to tell you these are fantastic, but they smell so bad. Ugh, just can't do it. But the Ocean Magic Minerals don't stink, and yet they still have all those beautiful nutrients for your plants or your sprouts. Because I use those for my sprouts too in a spray bottle. I'll spray my sprouts with those. So when I'm growing inside, I'm not so worried about the prebiotics. I'm more concerned with how can I boost the nutrients. So one of those little containers of sprouts that you get at the grocery store, what does that cost? Like $7? It might cost me $8 or $9 to grow that many sprouts because I use Ocean Magic Minerals and I do this, but the quantity of nutrients in my sprouts is like buying 10 of those from the grocery store. So if I'm thinking about cost effective, growing my own sprouts, a little container like this costing me more than I would pay in the grocery store, there is absolutely no comparison because I didn't have to buy 10 of those to get the same nutrient content, right? And that's with any gardening. But there's another factor too. You guys ready? You grow your own stuff. Plants are so intelligent that they're growing perfectly for you, not for anyone else. Now, I have to be really careful because I grow so much that I have to talk to my plants. Remember that you're also growing for my neighbors and for my friends that I'm giving these plants to, right? So I actually tell my plants, okay, yes, absolutely. We've got this going. We want, to heal from this. Thank you for being our medicine. On and on and on. But I'm also reminding my squash plants that, hey, half of you are going to go to Courtney and Christy, and you're going to go to Nicole, and you're going to, right? So the plants know they actually grow with you in that energy. So that's another thing about having something grown inside. You're in that energy, and that plant knows how to grow perfectly for you. Can you believe it? How beautiful is that? Okay, if you are going to grow inside, make sure that you avoid routers, okay, or smart meters on the other side of the wall, because your plants won't do that well. They really don't do well around EMFs. Electromagnetic frequency is not beneficial for plants, not at all. So we just want to make sure that where we place it isn't right beside something like that. Okay. Whew. Can you grow microgreens in a sunny window? Absolutely, Caroline. Any day. I actually have a local guy here. He's like a handyman. And I'm like, okay, I need windowsills that are like this wide, please. He's like, what? I'm like, you don't understand. We're going to have some plants in the windowsill, and I want to make sure they don't get tipped over, right? So we create these windowsills that are really wide as well whenever I want to grow inside. You can put up a table or just create a shelf or whatever, but you can always find a handyman that can put you a nice big windowsill in place too, which is fun. We use coffee bags that have not been treated with petroleum to cover the ground to create new space. That's a great idea, Jenny, because those coffee bags, that it's hemp, it's like it's a natural fiber, and it'll break down, and it will stop your mulch from going into the soil so quickly. So it keeps it above ground. It's a great idea. Organic coffee roaster gives them away. First come, first serve. Work great. I'll be looking for that. I don't know if I have any too many organic coffee providers here, but I'll look. Okay, so this is another thing. If you're in the northern hemisphere, if you're in the southern too, this works every all through the year. What are you putting back? What are you putting back in your soils or in your growing space? So that organic coffee piece, Jenny, that triggered it, because I'll take organic coffee grounds and I will just scatter them, totally scatter them over my gardens and over my grass. I have one little tiny patch of grass. I don't really like grass that much, but my kids like to play cornhole. So we keep one area of grass. Grass, you don't want it to fruit. Throw tons of coffee grounds on there. Get ready to mow it, because there's tons of nitrogen in your coffee grounds, and it will make the most beautiful greenest grass going. But my garden, I need fruiting. I want my tomatoes to fruit. So I'm not going to put my coffee grounds really thick. But say I made, or I found some organic coffee grounds and I have just a few pots in the house, I might sprinkle just a couple pinches in the pot. What about ashes? Okay. If you have access to ashes, ashes are beautiful for your garden, for your pots, for your grass, for everything. You can even put ashes in water and then take the water off after the ashes have soaked in there and put them in a hydroponic system. Can't use too much because it'll change the pH too much, but you can use a little bit of ash water. It's beautiful. It helps to bring acidic water down, alkalinize it. So we have to pay attention to that too, because different plants like acidic and some like alkaline, and some are more neutral. but we want to watch those things too. So I love growing in dirt because I can just scatter the ashes over everything. I can scatter the coffee grounds over everything. I can scatter bat guano. I can scatter worm castings. I can make worm casting tea. I can throw rabbit pellets. I can take the manure from the chicken duck pen and I can scatter it. Why? Because the dirt is a buffer. And the plants, if they have a buffer, will get what they need because they know how to pick up what they need. So that's what I'm looking for. How can I do as much back into my soil as I might be taking? Because the soil is flowing forward. It doesn't have always the ability to be rejuvenated, right? Because it's not able to move. And yet, how can I do that? So if you've had your garden, I never take my clothes off the garden in the fall. I wouldn't take the clothes off my kid and send them into the winter. I don't take the clothes off my garden. If I have something standing, I'll cut it off, let it lay down and let it sit there for the winter because the winter will break down that stuff and it will send it back into the soil. Right? So I want to make sure that I'm giving back to the soil more than I take. Always, always. And then in the springtime, I'll come and I'll move that, or I'll just put more dirt on it and I'll leave it in the soil because I do some till work. Like there's some pieces you just have to till up to get rid of weeds or to whatever. But as much as I don't have to till, like say I grew squash in this one area last year. I generally take my squash plants off. I should caveat that because squash plants have a tendency to carry molds, right? Leaf molds. So I'll take that off my space and then I might put some other dry stuff back on that space and cover it with dirt. I might not take it off at all. I'll just recover it. I'll cover it with something else and I'll plant something in holes. But if I'm trying to grow carrots, I can't really bury the leaves so much. I have to actually clean that up a little bit, right? So it depends on what you're growing where. And that's what this wintertime is beautiful for. So my gardening journal, I'm already planning where I can plant those things because otherwise I'm not going to get everything planted in the spring early enough for everything to do really well for the season. Because it's going to take me too long to figure out where I'm going to plant everything. So now is the time that I'm planting. Even if it's springtime, I might be planning my fall planting in the spring. Shaded plants, Madeline. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so here's another thing though. Do you know what's really cool when you have a really shaded area? You know what mirrors are really good for? They're amazing at bringing sun into a shaded area. And how cool is that? You have mirrors hanging in the trees or against the trees or whatever. So you can bring more sun into a shaded area without getting rid of all the foliage by using mirrors. Those mirror balls and different things like that. And you just put them in the sun and they bring more light into a shaded area. So that's something that can be played with. Oh, what is the best time to spray sprouts? Spray that. Spray the Ocean Magic Minerals on sprouts. Well, I put it, if I'm growing my sprouts in soil, I start spraying it as soon as I've planted it, Madeline. And then if I'm growing my sprouts with just water, I'll put Ocean Magic Minerals in my water to water my sprouts. And then I start spraying them as soon as I see them start coming out of the seed. I try not to keep them too wet so they don't mold, but I use Ocean Magic Mineral all the time with my sprouts. On my hydroponics, I do, Kyra. I pour cups of Ocean Magic Minerals into my reservoir for my hydroponics, and I spray my hydroponics, my plants as soon as their uptake. As soon as I see my secondary leaves, I'll start spraying a little bit of Ocean Magic Mineral on my hydroponics. You wish you were my neighbor, Priya? Well, I tell you what, I'd put you to work. We would garden, girl. I love that, Tracy. Having a compost pile is so forward thinking. It's so much about sustainable and food freedom because that compost every year is going to give you something. And years from now, it's going to give you more. And we can have a whole call on compost because it's fairly complicated and it's simple, but it's complicated because there's some things I don't want to put in my compost pile. So I'm careful about what goes in my compost pile because I use a ton of lemons and limes in my household. I don't actually want those all in my compost pile. They take a really long time to break down, but I can bury them or I can do something different with them because they'll break down differently. And then I don't want all these big branches and leaves in my big compost pile, but I will burn them and use the ashes. So there's some things I'm not going to put in my compost pile, but I will break it down so that I can put it back into the cycle. And yes, fruit and veggie scraps and juice pulp and burying it, worms, they love it. They love it. They'll come and they'll eat and then they'll go and poop it all along the way. So find a corner of your garden, but remember that if it's not buried, it's going to attract bugs and animals like skunks and raccoons. And you don't need those in your garden because they steal. They're very much little buggers, if you ask me. So you want to bury it. If you're going to do a compost and it's outside and it's not contained, definitely bury it. We will talk a lot about compost because it's a huge piece of this cycle and bringing it back into nature's principles. Perfect. We'll talk about compost lots, Jenny, as we go through this. Yeah, mirrors. So much beauty to a garden when you're bringing in mirrors and you're bringing in light, and it can be amazing. Well, there's your little secret garden, right? Magical when you can bring those things in. And it's amazing what else you can bring in too that keeps critters away. Like I have a perpetual sculpture in my garden, and it's a big eagle, and it keeps quite a few birds off my berries. But it does not keep the deer away. I'm going to have to plant more blackberries. I got to make enough for them too, I guess. And they like strawberries too. So I'm going to have to figure that out. But here's the thing. Just like we can plant plants that keep bugs away, we can plant plants that keep deer away. Oregano, garlic. There's all sorts of herbs like bee balm. I love that because my bees are in the top corner of my garden. So I can plant things that are beneficial for my bees, but also deter the deer from coming into the garden. Perfect, right? Perfect. That's what I want to do. So I'm thinking about this, but honestly, I just plant shit and then I listen and then I move it around based on what it asks for. I really do sometimes. So yes, I know what I want to put in a guild under my trees. And sometimes it doesn't work out. So I'll take that plant and I'll move it to a new tree. But what does it look like to garden? You get a pot, you put some dirt in it, you find a seed, you water it, you make sure it has a little light. Now it's going to come up eventually if that seed was viable. Then it's going to tell you a whole bunch. It's going to have leaves that are green or a different color. If they're yellow, there's probably something that they're not getting. Okay, so water, soil, sun, sometimes not even soil, sometimes just water and light and nutrients. That's what your soil provides. If you don't have soil, you have to be really good with your nutrients. It's good to have things like a turbidity meter if you're going to grow inside. It's good to have a pH meter if you're going to grow inside in water. So hydroponics, there's a few other things you have to pay attention because there's not the same buffer that you have with dirt. But it's beautiful to be able to go over and pick your lunch. I rarely put it in a bowl. I just go over to the tower and I pick a few leaves and some basil and I put them together and I roll them up and I eat them. I just had a huge meal. When it comes to nutrients, I had this much. When it comes to quantity of the food that I need to chew, it's this much. Perfect, because I don't really love chewing for hours. Do you? Okay, so there's another aspect of food freedom. Okay. When growing indoors, how to keep from getting leggy. So leggy, if you're new to gardening, leggy looks like the first leaves show up right here when it comes out of the seed, and the second leaves are like way up here. Leggy, big old long legs. Light, Tracy. Every single time it's light. You've got to get light closer to that plant because it's reaching for light. So leggy means not enough light. And that's where indoor lights can be helpful, even if you're not using them all the time, right? When you first get started, if you just use it for a few hours, because you have to have an extended amount of time for a plant to grow for most plants. So if you have a decreased amount of light time, you have to add external lights in order to bring your light up to around 16 hours of time. That's why your season is important, or your zone is important to understand. And so when you're growing inside, you have to have a certain amount of light for your plants to do anything. Okay. There's lots of really nice looking lights so this year I don't have my geothermal greenhouse built this year. I got a lot of things done, but didn't get that done. I had to bring my lemon, my lime, my avocado, and my fig tree in. There's really cool indoor lights that you can use that just can be on a timer and can go off for a few hours. So you can be in a sunny area of your house inside with lights that come on for a few hours, either before you wake up or after you go to bed at night, so that you don't have to be bothered by that artificial light. It's just like humans, SADS, when you don't get enough light in the wintertime, it can be hard on you. Well, plants don't do well. They think they know the amount of light is what causes them to either grow or not grow. They're listening, and they are so frigging intelligent, just like us. Same within soil growing inside, Tracy, they're always, always, always reaching for light. So you got to get really close with your light. Okay. Whew. How fun. Okay. We talked about lots of little details, but now you have a sense of where we can go with the gardening aspect of it. Okay. I also want to remind you that we go there with the emotional aspect. You know, how does it serve you to be in your garden? How can it help your mental health to be planting and growing something? We can talk about how much food do you actually need? If you can get the same amount in a container this size that you grew yourself compared to 10 containers at the grocery store, do you need to eat 10 containers of sprouts? It's not all about calories. Food freedom is about nutrients and what those nutrients can do for you. And do you actually even have to eat them? So I sit out in my garden and I'm just absorbing, man, those tomatoes, I don't have to eat them. I can get the energy of those foods as medicine without actually ingesting them. And I might ingest a few too, because tomatoes are really tasty. I thought it was funny because you'll get to know that I don't do a lot of food. I just don't. But I ate enough tomatoes this year that when I sweat, I smelled like a tomato plant. I was like, what the heck is this? I'm not even eating that many tomatoes, but I'm smelling like a tomato plant. That's how clean your body can get too. because that can show up that way because there's not a whole bunch of toxins in the way of you smelling like a tomato plant because you ate a dozen tomatoes. It's so funny. It's like, okay, whatever works. At least it smelled good to me. Some people don't like the smell of tomato plants. But we can go to our garden and we don't have to eat so much. So we don't have to grow, acres and acres and acres because the nutrient content is so much greater. Does that sound good? I like it. I don't really enjoy salads this big. I just chew. I'm not a cow. I don't want to eat all this green. But if I can eat a salad this and it's so rich and so flavorful and I can taste the nutrients in there, I'm pretty happy. Or I can just go and pull a few sprigs and I'm good to go. Your food is medicine. So when we're talking about food freedom, we're also talking about food as medicine. I'm just going to share it. We'll talk about this another time too. Oh, Jenny, we're going to talk so much about pollinator plants too. You bet. I have bees. So I learned from this woman that honey is not actually supposed to be all that enjoyable. It actually is supposed to be so strong with herbs and vitality and diversity that it burns the back of your throat. That's my goal. I'm headed towards the bees that I keep, the honey burning the back of my throat, and I need this much honey instead of this much honey. I just don't need that much. And okay, I can pull the honey. I have a flow hive, which means that I can pull honey from different parts of the season. So the bees will generally fill the middle one first, the first honey container first. And so that might not be really, really sweet honey because it will be really strong in that there's not a much available in the springtime. And then my next ones, when the flow is really heavy, those ones are going to be super sweet. And then as I move towards the end of the season where it's not quite so much moisture, again, that honey is going to be super strong. So I can pull different types of honey versus just extracting it all together and mixing it all up. Different parts of the season can be sorted out. And I'm really looking forward to that because I like honey. Like I like just normal honey too, but I really do. I want it to burn. I'm thrilled, Martha. Find as much flow forward with that honey as you can. Absolutely. But here's where we get into food as medicine, and we'll talk more about this in more detail. But if you haven't, I don't know. I don't necessarily like to read a whole bunch anymore either. I like to just listen to the plants. But in the Anastasia series, if you haven't read that, it's called the Ringing Cedar series. And the first book is called Anastasia. She talks about, and I loved this because it was like, yes, this is so connected to me, about putting seeds under your tongue for a period of time before you plant them, so that that plant is so connected that you are the only one that should eat from that plant. So every year that I planted, I would get my kids to hold 2 or 3 cucumber seeds and 2 or 3 tomato seeds under their tongue. And we would label them. We had these beautiful little spikes that we labeled those plants specifically for them. And then we would have a bucket of water beside our raised beds or in the garden. And everybody was encouraged when they were outside, if their feet got dirty or they wanted to wash their hands or rinse it, go rinse it in the bucket. That's what I watered the garden with. So it was for all of us. I had to push my husband to go rinse his hands and feet in that bucket every once in a while because that's not his thing. He's a city boy. But I would do that because then those things would grow for him too. But then that garden was growing for our whole family, but they had their very specific medicinal plants for them. And they were labeled. And nobody else was allowed to take from their plants because that was medicine that was for them. Why wouldn't we do that? That's how connected we can be to nature. How beautiful is that? Right? I go out and I sit with my bees every day and I say, thank you. Thank you for gathering the resins from the trees. And thank you for allowing me to have some of the propolis because that's what it is. And they do that to keep the immune system in the hive strong. So I'm going to thank them for collecting propolis. I let them know where I collect it from in the hive even. This is where I'm going to collect the propolis from. Thank you very much for collecting propolis for my family. Oh, and a few friends too. And they do. And that's where I collect the propolis from. We can talk to that. We can be that powerful in how we connect with everything. That's how I love to do this food freedom thing. I'm really glad you showed up tonight. So fun. Your specifics are important. They really are. Wherever you can grow or wherever you can do sprouts or whatever works for you, please bring your specifics because we'll talk about them. Because every single thing that we talk about is going to serve everybody. I grow everywhere. I have lots of acres now. I can grow all over the place. But I also grow in the house and I also grow in small spaces, right? So it's for all of us. There's different times of the year it's beneficial to grow inside. And that's what I do. So whatever it is, let's do it. And if it's a technical question, I might grab out a resource book and look it up. Bring the questions, bring the celebrations, because we're not just talking about growing it. We're also talking about how can we process it. Have you ever heard of zucchini flour? Who knew? Right? I always used to process my zucchini by just grating them and putting them in the freezer. Well, zucchini makes amazing banana bread. Why wouldn't I learn to use that flour in other things too? Not just in things that I'm okay with little chunks of zucchini in, but it's time consuming. But why not? Let's see what we can do with all of these things that take us throughout the year with these foods that are such incredible nutrients for us. Food freedom. What does it look like? Bring it. I'll be here next week, Monday morning. If you can't make that time, don't be afraid to send me questions and I'll answer them on the calls, okay? And I may post this as a video, but most of the time it's going to be a audio link that you can just listen to if you miss a call or you want to listen again, okay? Oh, new ideas for squash, currently. Yeah, me and all my neighbors. I actually put it all out on a huge stump out at the end of the road this year because I had so much. I was like, just take it. But there's really cool things you can do with it. So why not, right? Okay.
Thank you, Judy.
Yeah. Okay. Calls, Tracy. They're Tuesdays at 7 Eastern. And then Mondays at noon Eastern, right? 10 a.m. Am I right on that? I'm pretty sure. Let me take a quick look. Oh, 11, not noon, 11. So 9 a.m. Mountain, 11 a.m. Eastern on Mondays. And they just alternate back and forth, okay?
Did you change that? Because your email had said that they were at 10. Or mountain or noon mountain, noon Eastern.
Okay, so show of hands, what's better? 9 a.m. Mountain, which would be 11 Eastern, Okay, or 10 a.m. Mountain, noon Eastern. Some of it doesn't matter. So 10 a.m. Mountain for Tracy. Okay, so the later one works for more people. Tracy, can you do the 9 a.m.? Okay, Martha, can you do 11 a.m. Eastern? Okay, we're gonna go with the 9 a.m. Mountain. I'll change the email. Okay, so we're gonna go 9 a.m. Mondays Mountain, which is 11 a.m. Eastern. 11 a.m. Eastern on Mondays and 7 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, alternating each week. Okay. And I'll change the email. And if I did it wrong, okay, if you don't get the reminders because email sucks, the link for Zoom is listed in the resource module in the membership area. Okay, so you can always access, and I'll make sure that I have the time straight in there. You can always access the Zoom link if you don't get the reminders. We've set up reminders for those times. Hopefully my husband has set it up for the right time. But that Zoom link is in that membership area in the resource module, and it'll be pinned at the top, okay? And this week I will be filling out some of those resources and getting that set up properly and then listing the calls. Let's see what else shows up there. Who knows? It's like a gift. You never know what's going to be in that resource area or in that membership area. Never know. Okay. Yeah, same Zoom every week, okay? Okay. I didn't ask if you had a whole lot of questions, but does anybody have any burning questions right now? Okay, everybody's kind of been putting them in the chat anyway. I look forward to next week again. I'll be here.
Thanks, Judy.
So
Thank
welcome. Bye
Bye,
for
everyone.
now.
Everyone.
Thanks,
Mm,
everybody. This was so much fun.
awesome.
Thank you.
Up my alley the whole way, this one.
Thank you, Judy.
You're so welcome, Trisha. You all have an amazing week, okay? Oh, plant garlic. Plant garlic if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. And who can you share seeds with? Lots of fun. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.
For now.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.